night shift at the gas station, Charlie. I have never returned to that place, and I pray I never will. Working the night shift at the gas station isn't always a thrill, but I needed the extra cash. It was quiet, mostly. A few cars passing through, the hum of the overhead lights, and the low buzz of the refrigerators. But tonight was different. As I stood behind the counter, scanning magazines that no one would buy, a feeling of unease crept over me. My skin prickled with an inexplicable dread, and a chill ran down my spine. I glanced out the window. The empty parking lot seemed darker than usual. That's when I first noticed him. A man, tall and thin, standing beneath a flickering streetlight. He was just staring at the gas station, unmoving. I tried to shake off the feeling, chalking it up to my imagination running wild. But every time I looked out the window, he was still there, never taking his eyes off the store. I figured he was just waiting for a friend, so I continued with my work, trying to ignore him. Hours passed, and the occasional customer came and went. But the man remained. I couldn't help but watch him from behind the counter. He was so still, like a statue. The fluorescent lights above me hummed, casting eerie shadows on the shelves. Around 2 a.m., things took a turn for the worse. The power flickered, and then everything went dark. Panic set in as I fumbled for my phone, using its weak flashlight to navigate the store. I was alone, and the night seemed to close in around me. I heard a faint scraping sound, like fingernails on glass, coming from the front door. My heart raced as I crept towards the noise. When I shone my light on the glass door, I saw what caused the sound. The man was scratching at the glass, his face contorted into a twisted grin. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled backward, falling over a display of chips. I fumbled to my feet, my phone's light trembling as I pointed it towards the door. But he was gone. The man had disappeared into the darkness. Terrified and unsure of what to do, I decided to call the police. I locked myself in the manager's office, trembling as I recounted the strange events to the dispatcher. They assured me that an officer would be on their way, and I should stay put. As I waited, the feeling of dread only intensified. The shadows in the office seemed to come alive, dancing and writhing in the dim light. I heard whispers, faint and barely distinguishable. It was as if the night itself was trying to communicate with me. Time passed in a blur, and I was startled when a knock on the office door broke the silence. I cautiously opened it, relieved to see a police officer. He was a middle-aged man with a reassuring presence. I quickly explained the situation, and he assured me that he would check the area. I watched as he left the office, his flashlight casting eerie beams of light through the darkness. But moments later, he returned, his face pale. He told me that there was no sign of the man outside and that it was probably just a prank. Despite his words, I could tell he was unnerved. The officer said he would stay with me until my shift ended, just to be safe. As we sat in the office, the feeling of unease persisted. We heard strange noises coming from the gas pumps, like distant whispers and faint laughter. The officer suggested it might be the wind, but there was no wind that night. Time ticked by slowly, and the officer's radio crackled to life with a garbled message. He responded, and a look of confusion crossed his face. He told me he needed to go check something and would be back shortly. I watched as he left the office once more, leaving me alone in the eerie darkness. As I stood there in the flickering light of the gas station, my heart pounding, I realized the police officer hadn't returned. The silence that had fallen over the gas station was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerators and the distant whispers that seemed to emanate from nowhere. Fear and dread gnawed at me as I contemplated the officer's absence. Should I wait for him, or should I leave the gas station on my own? I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. It felt like the very walls of the store were closing in on me, suffocating me. Gathering what little courage I had left, I decided to step out of the office once more and find out what had happened to the officer. The harsh fluorescent lights revealed the empty store, devoid of any signs of life. I made my way to the glass door, where the officer had last stood. With a sense of impending doom, I peered outside. There, under the flickering streetlight, lay the police officer's flashlight, abandoned on the ground. Panic coursed through me as I picked it up, realizing something was terribly wrong. The officer had left behind his only source of light, a lifeline in the oppressive darkness. I called out for him, but my voice echoed through the empty parking lot. There was no response. The gas station was surrounded by an eerie stillness, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent lurked in the shadows. Summoning all my courage, I ventured out into the night, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. The cold air stung my skin as I cautiously made my way towards the flickering streetlight. My heart raced with each step, and the anxiety of the unknown gripped me like a vice. Under the wavering light, I saw something that sent a chill through my bones. A trail of dark, wet footprints led away from the gas station and disappeared into the distance. They were eerie and inexplicable, as if something had dragged itself along the ground. I followed the unsettling trail, my flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. The anxiety and fear welled up within me, and I couldn't help but feel that I was walking into a nightmare. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, but their origin remained elusive. As I continued to trace the trail of footprints, I suddenly came upon the police officer's radio, discarded on the ground. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Something had happened to him. But what? My mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Was the wet footprint blood? I didn't want to find out. I called out for the officer again, my voice trembling with fear. But there was still no response, only the haunting whispers that seemed to swirl around me. I felt a growing sense of dread, a suffocating fear that I was being watched and followed. With my heart in my throat, I reached a desolate clearing on the outskirts of the gas station property. And there, I finally discovered the source of the trail, a gaping hole in the ground, like a dark, foreboding abyss. It seemed to go on forever and ever, and I couldn't see the bottom. Leaving the pit behind, I hurried back to my car, my heart pounding so hard. I sped away from the gas station, my thoughts consumed by the inexplicable events of that night. Days passed since that terrifying night at the gas station. The memory of the inexplicable events continued to haunt me, keeping me awake at night. I also wondered what had happened to the police officer. I was then contacted by the local police department for an investigation. The officer had been found, but not in the way I had hoped. He was discovered in a remote, desolate area near the gas station, brutally murdered. Shock filled every inch of my being. The news was devastating, and I couldn't help but blame myself for his fate. The guilt of not doing more to help him weighed heavily on my conscience. I cooperated with the police in their investigation, providing them with all the information I could about the man I had seen that night. But as the investigation progressed, it became clear that the man had left no traces, no clues to his identity or his motives. The police were no closer to catching him than I was. The trauma of that night changed me. I became plagued by nightmares, the whispers and the pit haunting my sleep. It left me forever scarred, a prisoner of my own fear. And to this day, the man remains at large, a specter that lurks in the darkness, waiting for his next victim. The gas station, with its eerie presence, stands as a grim reminder of the horrors I witnessed. I have never returned to that place, and I pray I never will. If you found any enjoyment in the video, I implore you to click that like button and subscribe if you dare.